Hey everybody, Retrofied here, and today's day 16 of this month-long marathon leading up to the Switch 2's launch. And this officially means that we are halfway there. We only have about 2 more weeks till the Switch 2 comes out. And because of this, I wanted to talk about everything we know leading up to the Switch 2's launch. Everything we're getting, everything that has been leaked, literally just every single little piece of info that we know so far. So if you guys are excited about the Switch 2, make sure you comment below, and make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because like I said, we're halfway done with this month-long marathon. But let's actually get into what I mean by this. So to no one's surprise, the Switch 2 comes out June 5th, with Mario Kart World being its main launch title. So Mario Kart World is a brand new open world Mario Kart game. We haven't had a new Mario Kart game technically in 13 years, so for us to get a new Mario Kart game that's completely different than every other Mario Kart game is really incredible. Another headlining game for the Switch 2 is Donkey Kong Bonanza. This isn't a launch title, it comes out July 17th, but this is just like Mario Odyssey. The game looks insanely in-depth and just looks so much fun to play. Most of the map looks like it's destructible, and it looks like it even connects back to old Donkey Kong games. And this game features his new design, which is kind of controversial with fans. So we're getting a game called Nintendo Switch Welcome Tour, which is kind of like a manual for the Switch 2. It has some little mini games here and there, and basically just shows you how to use the system. This game also comes out launch day and costs $10 USD. Another really cool game that we're getting is Dragon Drive. So this game fully uses the mouse controls as its own motion control, and this game seems to be a little fun, gimmicky game that uses the mouse controls just like how ARMS used the motion controls of the original Joy-Cons. So moving past the games, what do we actually know about the system? So obviously the Joy-Cons now connect magnetically rather than sliding on and attaching like the original Joy-Cons. This looks to be a great change because now the buttons are so much bigger on the side and you don't have these flimsy rails that can get stuck or just break off. And speaking of these Joy-Cons, we got a leak saying that we're going to be getting interchangeable faceplates for the Joy-Cons where you can basically swap out the colors of them so they're not just red and blue. Now these controllers have a way higher HD rumble factor than the original ones did. You can see this in a recent Nintendo Today video they uploaded where you can basically use the haptic feedback to find your controller, and it basically sounds like there's a speaker inside the controller, but there's no speaker, it's just the vibrations from the HD rumble. One really cool feature we're seeing with the Switch 2 is Game Chat. This is Nintendo's in-house party system. So like how PlayStation has parties and how Xbox has parties, Nintendo is finally getting to the party about 15 years late. But the Switch 2 has its own mic on it, and you can actually connect a camera to video chat with your friends. And it has a really cool voice isolation mode, so you can have your Switch 2 sitting in your living room and you can still talk to your friends while there's stuff going on in the background. So another really cool thing you can do with your friends on the Switch 2 is Game Share. We saw something similar to this back in the DS with Download Play. Basically, you can download a small trial version of that game and play it with your friends. Instead of having 4 cartridges, you just need 1 cartridge. So talking more about the system has 256 gigabytes of internal storage, and you can expand this by using SD cards, but sadly you can't use your regular micro SD card. You have to get a new micro SD express card. Now I'm pretty sure these cards run a lot faster than the original micro SD cards, but you can still add whatever storage you want. So if you get a 5 terabyte micro SD express card, you can put that in your Switch. So we've talked plenty about what the system is, but what about what the system actually looks like when you're playing it? So the UI of the Switch 2 is very similar to the original Switch, but everything just looks a lot cleaner and rounder. There are a lot more icons on the Switch 2's home screen than there were on the Switch 1's home screen, but that's because of the so many new features that the Switch 2 has. There are a lot more added sounds to the home screen than there were on the Switch 1, which adds kind of a little benefit. Also, take this with a grain of salt, but it was potentially leaked that we could be getting themes later on down the road. But like I said, take that with a grain of salt because most of the leaks might not happen. So one huge thing about the Switch 2 that everyone needs to know, if you're going to watch any part of this video, watch this part, the game key cards. What exactly are game key cards, you might be asking? Game key cards are a new format of Switch 2 games where it's a physical cartridge, but it doesn't have the entire game on that cartridge. Rather, it has kind of a key that says that you can download that game and you can play that game. There's so much misinformation, so much hate about these cards online, and I want to kind of set the record straight. These aren't going to be for Nintendo's games. These are for third-party games so that more third-party games can be released on the Switch 2. This is a good thing because yes, these third parties could just make digital copies of their game and not put it on an actual physical cartridge, but then more people would hate about that because they're trying to get rid of physical games because they're not putting it on there. But these cards are nothing new with other companies. And yes, saying Nintendo is just following the trend kind of sucks because, like I said, this isn't necessarily a good thing, but having the argument that Nintendo is being greedy doesn't really make sense when Microsoft and Sony have been doing this for nearly a decade now. If you want to look at this in a good way, this is so positive just because of what this means for third-party games. Like I said, we're going to be getting so many more third-party games because of this. So when you're playing your Switch 2 a year down the road, you're probably going to have a couple of these Game Key cards just because so many third-party games will end up using. So I briefly talked about the Joy-Cons before, but let's actually talk about the Joy-Cons. They have a whole new gimmick this time around, a mouse mode. These can be used as a computer mouse. So a lot of games are going to be supporting this. We already saw this with Metroid Prime 4. We're seeing this with Dragon Drive, but a lot of games are going to end up supporting this, and this is kind of a new motion control input because we're seeing in Dragon Drive you can drag and drive with these mouse controls, and Nintendo has already said that these will work on your pants, so you don't need to be sitting at a desk to use them. You can just be sitting down on your couch, sitting down on your chair, and use these mouse controls. So for the actual screen of the Switch 2, it's a 1080 display. Sadly, it's not OLED, but it is LCD with just beautiful visuals. And it also can go up to 120 frames per second on handheld mode. Putting it in the dock mode will let you go up to 4K and adds a little bit more performance to the Switch 2, but this system is so much more powerful than the Switch 1. A lot of insiders have said that the Switch 2 is as powerful as a PS4 Pro. Alright, so that's most of what we know about the system. Let's go back to some more games and some more cool features about it. So one really cool feature is the new camera. Sadly, there's no camera on the actual Switch itself, but there is a camera expansion that you can buy and hook it up to your Switch 2. And you can even use this while it's in handheld mode because the Switch 2 has 2 USB-C ports on it. But you can hook up this camera, and some games will actually use it for the game or for a mini game in said game. But you also can use this with game chat. We've seen with a lot of ads, Paul Rudd included, that you can use video chat. And Nintendo has shown off that it's going to be a little bit laggy themselves, which is a good thing for this company to do. They're showing that it's not perfect, but it's still something really cool. Okay, so for the final main part I want to talk about is going back to games. A big new thing we're seeing on the Switch 2 is Switch 2 editions of games. So we're going to be getting a lot of free upgrades, but also some paid upgrades that add kind of DLC to some Switch 1 games. We're seeing this with Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Mario Party Jamboree, Kirby in the Forgotten World, and there are so many more that are going to come out soon enough. So some of these games have an entire DLC coming with them. Some of them have just a little small expansion, but we're getting a bunch of patches for a bunch of games that are already on the Switch 1 launch day, so that they look better. And another really cool thing that we're getting game-wise on the Switch 2 is GameCube games. Finally, we're getting GameCube games with Nintendo Switch Online. So if you have the expansion pack for Nintendo Switch Online, you can actually play a bunch of GameCube games, including Luigi's Mansion and Majora's Mask launch day. And the game I've been saving for last is Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. This is a new installment in the series that is confirmed to be canon that comes out later this year. And there's actually a creator's voice for this game today. So yeah, if you guys are so excited about the Switch 2 just like I am, make sure you leave a comment below, tell me what you're excited about. And like I said, make sure you subscribe because we only have about 2 weeks left before the Switch 2 actually comes out. So I'll see you guys tomorrow.